Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Howie Hain Show, Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. Where do you begin? Where do you begin after the inauguration on Monday? The executive orders, the progress yesterday. It's just, it's an incredible week. It's only Wednesday. It feels like it's been 10 days. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start with something for some reason, is hitting a little closer to home due to my upbringing, where I was raised, the generation I'm in, and my age. So let me lay some groundwork for what I'm going to do here. Let me first of all just make sure we're sharing. We got everything going. Okay. Okay. So Marco Rubio is someone that I feel like I grew up with. So I wasn't sure exactly his age. He was sworn in yesterday by Vice President Vance to be Secretary of State, or 72nd Secretary of State. And Marco Rubio, the reason it's significant, I looked doing some research this morning, and apparently he's about a year older than me, almost very close to a year. And I remember Rubio. I remember him coming onto the scene. I remember Rush Limbaugh talking about Rubio, and Rubio was this energetic, wide-eyed, incredibly articulate conservative, a Reagan conservative. And I think that's what I want to lay the foundation today, is the role of Ronald Reagan. We're not hearing much about him right now, but we did see something at the inauguration, which was really interesting. Trump just basically was demolishing not just Biden, but basically every president that was sitting to his left. And so you have Bush and Clinton and Obama, and of course Carter, God rest his soul, and Biden. And I think, and Bush too was of course deceased as well. But everybody after Reagan has been part. Really, I think we have to look at this historically. Part of what we've been just been rescued from. We've been rescued from a tremendous force that increased the size of Washington and the power of Washington. And that with that power, less rights to the states, less rights to the individual, the fear of the founding fathers. And Trump comes in 2016 trying to confront that. He does in many ways, and of course is just pummeled for it. Okay. And then of course spends the last 4 years making him, in my argument, I think, objectively, I don't understand how anybody could not see him as the most prepared president to begin on day one. Because how many presidents have 4 years to contemplate, to meditate, to strategize, to reflect, and to plan another term? It's amazing. So he goes in, he's an incredible speech, executive orders, and it's when I saw Marco Rubio didn't get a lot of attention yesterday. A lot of other things that Trump is doing is getting more attention. And I want to pull back and talk about Rubio. And more than Rubio, and more than the president, Trump, it's the presidency, and it's the office of Secretary of State, and the significance. I mean, Secretary of State is just it's a monumental position. It's he's the highest member of the cabinet after the vice president, and then the most important member is the Secretary of State. And let's look at also, just to get a little historical grounding, doing some research today. And if we look at the Secretary of State, if we go to the U.S. Department of State website directly, and just look at the duties of the Secretary of State, and if you look at, it's two sentences, the opening paragraphs, 2 sentences, and let's look at the words. Duties of the Secretary of State. Under the Constitution, okay, the President of the United States determines U.S. foreign policy. It's an amazing reminder. The President, one person, okay, of the United States determines U.S. foreign policy. The Secretary of State, appointed by the President with the advice and consent of the Senate, is the President's chief foreign affairs advisor. He doesn't just implement, he advises the president. And the president determines the U.S. foreign policy. So the power of the executive office when it comes to foreign affairs is tremendous. Okay? Of course, he can't declare war, Congress must. But the president determines U.S. foreign policy. The Secretary of State is his chief advisor. Okay. The Secretary of State carries out the president's foreign policies through the State Department and the Foreign Service of the United States. So, chief advisor, president sets the foreign policy, Secretary of State is his chief advisor, and he carries it out through the State Department and the Foreign Service. So, let's see, created in 1789 by Congress as a successor to the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Department of State is the senior executive department of the U.S. government. The Secretary of State's duties relating to foreign affairs have not changed significantly since then, but have become far more complex as international commitments multiplied. These duties, the activities and responsibilities of the State Department include the following. There's a whole list, but they conduct negotiations concerning foreign affairs. They serve as the president's principal advisor. They grant and issue passports to American citizens. They advise the president on appointments of U.S. ambassadors, ministers, consuls, diplomatic representatives. It goes on and on. It's an incredibly important role. And let's look at the list of U.S. Department of State. He's the 72nd. So secretaries of state, look at this. I'm going to look at the top 10 here. The first 10. Number 1, Thomas Jefferson. Number 4, John Marshall, who became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the famous Chief Justice. James Monroe, President, right? James Madison, President. John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, President. All right, we have, and it goes on and on. Daniel Webster, Martin Van Buren, James Buchanan, Daniel Webster. Let's see, who else? Of course, in recent time, we have people like, let's go into the modern time. We have Henry Kissinger, okay, Muskie, Alexander Haig, George Shultz, James Baker, all right? Warren Christopher, Madeleine Albright, of course, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, Rex Tillerson, Pompeo, and of course, under Biden, Blinken. Okay, so 72nd by Rubio is one of the most important posts in the administration, therefore the world. President sets the foreign policy. Secretary of State is his chief advisor, and he's the primary force of implementing those policies. All right, Rubio himself, what I think I should do is let me play the video of Rubio, and I think we'll stop. We'll go through the video. We'll look at the language. We'll look at the body language. We'll look at what's going on. So Vance is going to do this. This was yesterday, January 21st, 2025. Vice President J.D. Vance swears in Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. And this is going to be, I'm going to share the video from Forbes Breaking News on YouTube. So let me share it with you. Okay. Share. Breaking News. Share. Okay. And make it full screen. All right. And let's make sure everybody's got it. All right, we're good. All right. Getting this, huh? Okay. So this is Vice President J.D. Vance swearing in Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. I think I'll just let it play through. Well, it's 8 minutes. No, I'll stop it. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll break it down. I think there's a lot here to look at, and then we'll bounce back and forth and take a look at some stuff. Okay, here we go. So this is they're going to come in together.
Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? I want to give a special welcome to Senator Rubio's family, especially his 4 beautiful kids and his wife. Thank you guys for being here. It's a great occasion. I will say that it's pretty hard to top being sworn in as vice president and then the Buckeyes win the national championship the very same day. But this is a hell of a start to a run because Marco is one of my favorite people in Washington. And, you know, he's a son of Cuban immigrants to this country. He grew up in very humble beginnings, but he has an incredibly deep love of our nation. He is a bipartisan solutions seeker, a guy who can actually get things done, but a conservative of great principle and great vision. And I think more than almost anybody that I've met in Washington the last few years, Senator Rubio, I think, understands the distinctive priorities of President Trump and why it represents such a significant and frankly important and needed departure from a generation of failed foreign policy. Senator Rubio will be the chief diplomat of the United States of America, but he will remain a friend. I'm proud to know him, and I'm proud to do this. So
all right. So let me just interrupt a second. So we have Vice President J.D. Vance, who, let's also just look at him for a second. He's 40 years old. Okay. I like about this, as soon as I started watching this morning, I could notice that Vance is nervous. This is extremely competent man, extremely articulate, one of the most articulate politicians, and I don't say that in the derogatory, servants of the public, is J.D. Vance in a long time. Extremely articulate, but he's nervous, and I think it's great. I think some degree of nerves and shows humility. This is a monumental. Put yourself in the shoes of these participants. This is the United States of America, right? The strongest nation, the most influential nation in currently, and arguably ever in the face of its tentacles just reach around the entire globe and into outer space now. So you have this degree of, I love it. He's never been vice president. He was sworn in yesterday. He's never sworn in somebody else, as he's going about the secretary. Here he is, 40-year-old man, vice president, going to swear in somebody to be secretary of state. So I think it's always interesting to look at the context and take a breath and not forget they're human beings, right? We always looking at them from a distance and just guys getting up this morning like everyone else, right? And Rubio, his posture shows the humility. His wife looks nervous, and appropriately so. If you're standing there thinking, I got this all, well, you know what? You probably don't have the humility to take on this role, because you need a degree of humility. You need confidence, and you need the command of the material, if you will. Rubio has that, and so does Vance. But I appreciate it. So I'm going to look. He did mention his humble beginnings, So if you're not familiar with Rubio, he's a first-generation American. His parents are both from Cuba, born in Cuba. They came over in 1956. All right. I think they came to Miami. They lived in a short time in Utah. They came back to Florida, and Marco was born in Miami, and raised, a little time in Utah, and then raised in Miami. They're a Catholic family. We'll talk about Miami and in a little while about what's significant about Miami, what's significant about Cubans. Of course, Cubans are considered Hispanic because of the tie to the Spanish language. Latin Americans because of Latin, the Romance language of Latin and French and Portuguese, and they speak. So, but Cubans also have the great majority of Cubans have their heritage tied back to Spain. To actual Spain. So there's a degree of Catholicism in Cuba and a degree of conservatism in Cuba that is for Cuban refugees that came to the United States and primarily to Florida and Miami particularly, and before they moved out. That is important to remember. And so their lineage is one that was open to Reagan. When Reagan comes about, so 1980 to 88 was Reagan. I was born in the 70s, like Marco, and we really grew up in the 80s under the impression of Reagan. And so all those presidents to the left of Trump the other night, and the ones who were deceased, everybody after Reagan really was this whether they're good people, whether they had good intentions or not, they really were part of the problem that we're in now. The expansion of government, the role of government in our daily life, the force of the government to manipulate and control that led to this giant monster. Of course, Bush 1 and Bush 2 were less so than Biden and Obama. Okay. And Clinton, maybe, compared to Obama wasn't nearly as bad, but, but even Bush, they expanded the government, so Reagan was really somebody who stood out in terms of conservatism in the truest sense. Okay. Conservatism, trying to return to the principles of a strong military and constitutional roots and putting in great justices on the Supreme Court. So that's a little groundwork, right? And Rubio's got 4 kids. He's been married over, I think, 1998, 88, 98. He was married, so it's over 25 years. That's all. Why we're doing it. Why don't we talk about also? He was elected to the House of Representatives of Florida House of Representatives. He became Speaker of the House, Florida House of Representatives. Then he ran for senator. I believe it was 2011. It was a 3-man race. He won that race. That was the time when we began to know him. I really specifically remember Rush Limbaugh being very impressed, and we all were. His ability to speak and articulate conservatism in the Reagan line. That's why I keep pointing this out about. Excuse me, let me take a sip. Why I keep pointing out Reagan, because Rubio, to understand my generation or this age group here, early 50s, you really need to understand the role of Reagan. And if you're younger, it doesn't mean as much. And if you're older, well, then of course it goes back to even Kennedy, right? This generation from Kennedy forward. But Reagan, to be born a Reagan conservative, I remember Reagan being shot. I remember clear as day. So I guess I was, 8, 9 years old. I remember coming home and seeing the news. Of course, no internet at the time, and Reagan being shot. I remember even Reagan making a joke as he was going into the operator. And Reagan was a lot closer to dying than people thought. And I remember these things. I remember they had it said on the news that Reagan asked the surgeon or the doctor who was about to perform surgery on him if he was a Republican. Reagan always had a great sense of humor. So this was, and of course, the Soviet Union is still intact. Margaret Thatcher, right, in England. So you have this groundwork. The Berlin Wall is up. Okay, this is what people like Rubio are raised in. And his parents coming from Cuba. Cubans, in a particular way, understand the threat of a totalitarian government because they lived under it. They love America. They love the entrepreneurial spirit, and they love freedom. And and hand in hand with that, it usually goes with a great gratitude and love of America. All right, so here comes the swearing in. And we'll take a good look at it and look at the words. Maybe I'll let the swearing in take place, and then we'll go back and look at the words of the swearing in. Okay, here we go.
Senator Rubio, thank you. I also, of course, want to thank President Trump for nominating Senator Rubio and giving me a first easy swearing in. This is the first time I've ever sworn in an official in the United States government. And I want to thank Senator Jim Risch and his family for making this easy. You guys got this done and got it done very quickly. 99-0, right? I think even I wouldn't have got close to 99-0.
Right, that's important, right? First one to be confirmed, 99-0. One abstained, and 90. I mean, that's respect. He's well liked. It also shows that at the end of the day, our chief diplomat should be supported by everybody. He's going out to represent all of us around the world, and it's important to have that consensus. But 99-0 is a sign that Rubio has been around a long time. He's respected. There was even a time where Rubio, I think, was being sucked into the machine. Okay, and that's when he ran for president. I didn't finish out his tenure, right? He was elected the Senate 2011. He 2015, he decides to run for president. He's not going to seek re-election for the Senate. He has to bow out because Trump is running ahead. Okay, at that time, that's when Rubio, it was the first time in my life I remember Rubio thinking, is Rubio becoming one of these Washington Republicans who's just being massaged by the machine and losing his essence? I remember thinking that, and I think there was something to that. He pulls out of the race. He jumps back into the race for Senate for his own seat. He wins his Senate seat. He endorses Trump. And since then, I think like many people, have seen the light with Trump, and he in a sense he was technically a supporter the whole time, but it wasn't, from what I remember, my impression, it wasn't this really strong endorsement. He endorsed him, but it was there was always kind of a caution with Trump with many people, and that's why like somebody like Peter Thiel is important. Peter Thiel, the tech investor, because they were so early, some people, and they were really early, and they got it. They saw who Trump was early on, and they saw it. Well, Rubio, and I don't hold this against Rubio or anybody, because it's life, and you're living life in a certain way. You're in a certain situation, and sometimes things are suspect, and you don't know who they are, and it seems so foreign. And there's so much negative press that it's hard to buy in fully. So Rubio does. He sees the light. He goes fully with Trump. He's on the trail with Trump. His early talk that he would be the Secretary of State, and so he is. So here we go.
So Senator Rubio, it's a great testament to your career of service, and this is a new chapter, man. But I think you're going to do great. So great. So I think that we're going to administer the oath, and then Senator, you'll say a few words. Is that right? Let's do it. Okay. So please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Marco Rubio.
I, Marco Rubio.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies.
Against all enemies.
Foreign and domestic.
Foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office which I'm about to enter.
So help you God. Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
All right. Beautiful, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but just watching that makes me tear up a little bit, because I think it's moving. We have a great nation, and these are great positions, and these are just human beings put in these positions. And the reminder today, I think the theme of today is to remember that we're all just fellow humans on this journey, and some get put into elevated positions, and when they go in with a degree of humility and acknowledging that, I think it's very powerful. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back and look at the actual swearing in and the words, and let's stop and look at what is actually said here. Let me see here.
I, Marco Rubio.
Okay, hold on. Go back a little bit right here. Okay, here we go.
So
I'm going to stop
please raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Marco.
Raise your right hand, right? Like an oath, like in court, and put the hand on the Bible. Okay?
Rubio.
I, Marco Rubio.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Right? Do solemnly swear. Right? An oath, right? In this day and age, do oath. Remember what an oath, what your word meant, right? In the Greco-Roman tradition, like you died for you. If you gave your word, you'd be willing to die for it. The swearing in, right? To defend the Constitution of the United States, to believe, not in the same way as we believe in God, but to believe and have faith in a document that you believe is consistent with God's will for human beings, which maximizes human freedom and the spirit to be an individual. In order to the reason where we always promote individuality is because that's what makes the best community. And the best community produces the best individuals. It's a yin and yang. It goes together. Okay, it's always about humans as a whole, but we can never. It's when we err on one side or the other. If it's only about human freedom, only the individual, well, then it's anarchy. If it's only about the community, then it's a totalitarian, socialistic, communistic, godless machine that loses all the individuality and the beauty of the person, the individual person. So that's where you're swearing, you're believing in to defend this document, this beautifully, I believe, divinely inspired document called the U.S. Constitution. Okay, and written by a group of men who were inspired. I'm reading a fantastic book about the radical nature of the founding of our nation. It wasn't so radical in the violent sense. A lot of revolutions are very physically. Of course, we had a war; it was very violent, but it was more an intellectual revolution. People began to found the fathers of the movement began to say like, and their wives were very important. Maybe not acknowledged, maybe not official roles, but the women behind the men of this nation were always involved. You see that with John and Abigail Adams, particularly. So these ideas they took and they put together and they created this document. And what's so beautiful about that is it's very concise. It reminds me of the great monastic movements. The monastic movements that lasted are the ones that weren't overburdensome. And the Constitution isn't overburdensome. It focused on what the federal government can do, right? And everything else is left to the states and the individuals to decide. So let's continue with the swearing in.
Against all enemies,
Against all enemies,
foreign and domestic.
foreign and domestic.
Defended against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Right? He takes this freely. Without any mental, he's not in the back of his mind saying, I'm not sure about this. And he's not being forced into it by some devious mechanism.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office which I'm about to enter.
So help you God. Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
By the way, so help me God. That's part of the swearing in. So help me God. One nation under God. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God. Okay? Now listen to Rubio's words. I think, bravo. I'm happy for Marco. I'm happy. I'm happy for one of my generation here. I really feel a solidarity with Marco. Of course, he's from Miami. I'm from New York. He's Cuban. I'm not Cuban. Okay. And that's the point. We were raised under a belief system that was pushed forward by the great man, Ronald Reagan. And of course, others before him, William F. Buckley, intellectuals, and Milton Friedman. In fact, I have a Reagan clip for you that's fantastic. And if you've been listening to our clips of Friedman, you'll see where Reagan got it. So we're always standing on the shoulders of someone else. And let's hear what Rubio has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for making time. It's been a busy 72 hours, yeah, maybe longer, but 96 hours, I guess. But first, I want to thank Jeanette, my wife, who has been so supportive. As the Vice President knows well, it's impossible to do any of these jobs we do here, including the Senate, but now in this new role, without the support of our family and particularly of our spouses. And so thank you for being supportive every step of the way. I would not stand here before you today without that. I'm also...
I just love, you can say, well, what else is he going to do? No, you don't have to lead with that, but he's leading with the acknowledgement of his spouse and his wife. And I think it's so, we can never get tired of that. I know there's a lot of men in this audience. And if you're a woman in this audience, I mean, you understand that as well from watching your parents or watching your married children or your own marriage or whatever, the marriage of your neighbors. It's hard. Okay. Marriage is not an easy task. It's one of the greatest blessings we can be involved in. But when people are working hard, and no matter what it is, whether it's a celebrated position or not, we know that very few people are elevated to the position they end up in or achieve if they're married, without the spouse being a big part of that. So to acknowledge that, and like I just said, the founding fathers, and of course the founding wives. Okay, so right away to acknowledge that, I think again it shows where his heart is. You can see by his posture and facial expressions that this is a humble moment. And an appropriately humble moment.
Thrilled and grateful that all four of my children are here. They're the most important legacy any of us will leave behind. The most important job I'll ever have is that of a father and a husband. And I'm honored that they are able to join us. Amanda, my oldest, Daniela, my second, Anthony, our third, and then Dominic. I'm very happy they're able to see this today. I also want to thank my colleagues, Senator Risch and Ms. Risch, for joining us. He did a great job managing the committee, which brought us here to this point, but he's also been one of my closest friends in my time in the U.S. Senate. In fact, we, by reason of chance, certainly not by design, we wound up basically being first and second behind one another on seniority in every committee. So we even sat next to each other on the floor. So people thought it was a plot. It was not by design, and but it's one of the most special relationships I've established. And obviously, it's an honor to be with the vice president, who I think is going to be phenomenal. Someone I knew and admired and actually relied on for policy ideas before he was even elected to the Senate, and now will do an extraordinary job and for the president. I can't think of a better voice for the world and for the president's policies.
I want to stop right there. The facial expressions on Vance, I think, are really, in a sense, beautiful, and his wife. The three of them are in a humbled moment. I think it's really. I don't care if you think I'm wasting time or not. It's important. This show emphasizes these moments because our culture is nothing without men and women of integrity and sincerity and open hearts, wounded hearts. Right? And redemption and reconciliation and moving on and betterment and growth mindset, all this, it all starts with a pure good heart. And I think when he just complimented Vance, you can see on Vance's face. In fact, I'm gonna play it back 10 seconds and watch Vance's face. When he compliments, Vance is smiling, and when he compliments, it's almost as if Vance is going to tear up. They're feeling the weight of the responsibility, the weight of the office that they're entering.
On for policy ideas before he was even elected to the Senate, and now will do an extraordinary job and
look at him
for the president. I can't think of a better voice for the world and for the president's policies. As far as the task ahead,
we remember Vance's mom, right? I believe she's clean now, but she was an addict, right? I believe heroin or opioid, or I'm not sure exactly what the drug was, but a drug addict, addicted to drugs. And he was raised in that environment. And, it's great. His book and the movie made by the book, directed by Ron Howard. It's a good movie. And the book is better. And there he is, 40 years old, swearing in the Secretary of State, hearing kind words, and then the look on his face, you can see that the weight. There's a lot of weight. We need to pray for these men and their women and their children and their parents. We need to pray for our nation. Continue to pray. If you believe that prayer had any part in this reconciliation or this return or this redemption moment for our nation, well, then we got to keep praying. Pray for Vance. Pray for Rubio. Pray for Trump. Pray for the entire cabinet. Pray for Mike Johnson. Pray for the Senate. Pray. And of course, pray for the Democrats too.